Good evening. I'm calling the regular meeting of the University Place City Council for Monday, April 5, 2021 to order. We are conducting our meeting remotely in compliance with the Special Open Public Meetings Act issued by Governor Inslee's emergency order. City Clerk, can you please conduct the roll?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Figueroa. Councilmember Keel.
Councilmember Keel, present.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, present.
Councilmember McCluskey.
Councilmember McCluskey, present.
Councilmember Fleming.
Councilmember Fleming here.
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington.
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington here.
Mayor Belisi.
Mayor Belisi here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Okay. I would like to call for a motion to excuse Councilmember Figueroa.
Mayor Belisi, I move that we excuse Councilmember Figueroa from tonight's meeting.
I have a first. Do I have a second?
Councilmember Keel, I second.
I have a first and a second. Are there any objections to excusing Councilmember Figueroa this evening? Okay, seeing none, motion carries. Thank you. Before we begin our meeting, we have a few special rules I want to go over with everyone. First, the participation First is the participation in public comments. Written comments will continue to be accepted by email. Comments received by the 5:30 deadline will have been electronically provided to City Council for their consideration. Subject to technological limitations, the Council will also accept telephonic comments. Members of the public can call the number listed on the agenda, 1-509-342-7253, conference ID number 197-319-542#. For those calling in, please be advised that calls will be taken in the order it is received. Secondly, for council members, since the second half of our meeting is our study session items, I will forego the seating and voting chart that has typically been used in the past. I do ask that if you would like to speak, to please use your raise hands option and wait to be recognized before speaking. With that, may I ask Mayor Pro Tem Worthington to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mayor Belisi. Of course, it would be my honor. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. At this time, may I have a motion to approve the agenda as submitted?
This is Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, and yes, I move for the approval of the agenda as submitted.
Okay, I have a first. Do I have a second?
Councilmember Keel, I second.
Okay, I have first and a second. Are there any objections to the motion? Okay, hearing none, the approval of the agenda passes unanimously. Thank you. This evening is a rather bittersweet presentation this evening. We have a longtime planning commissioner that retired after serving 16 years on the Planning Commission. The majority of those years were spent as the chair of the Planning Commission. In fact, I believe Mr. Quisenberry has the honor of being the longest serving chair of our Planning Commission as a result. I had the great honor of working side by side with him when I served on the Planning Commission from 2005 until I resigned from the Planning Commission to assume my position on City Council in 2010, and he became the chair after my retirement from the Planning Commission. I do have a presentation for Mr. Quisenberry. He is here this evening, unfortunately not in person due to COVID, but I would like to read the certificate of recognition. The City Council of the City of University Place would like to recognize Cliff Quisenberry for his service as a member of the University Place Planning Commission from March 2005 until February 2021. During his term on the Planning Commission, Mr. Quisenberry was a key contributor and valued advisor to the City Council. Mr. Quisenberry, serving as chair of the Planning Commission, participated in a significant number of city planning efforts, including but not limited to a major update of the city's comprehensive plan, shoreline master program, and use regulations, amendments to the zoning code regarding signs, view protection, drive-through restaurants, and regulations for marijuana sales, processing, and production. In the last years of his service on the commission, Mr. Quisenberry helped the city establish a regional growth center sub-area plan and a form-based code. The dedication to this important work exhibited by Mr. Quisenberry is greatly appreciated. This is being presented to you on February 5th, 2021. And along with that, hopefully you can see, we will be sending you out
Oh, wow.
this plaque along with your recognition. And as I stated earlier, this recognition cannot even begin to thank you for all that you have done in the extensive amount of research and work that you had to do to develop these plans and work towards the betterment of our community. And thank you. I can't say it enough. I hope you enjoy your retirement, but that this won't be the last that we see of you, and that you will continue to participate in community events and be the dedicated member of our community that you have been for the past 16 years. So.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, Mayor Belisi, and all of you. And again, it was always my pleasure and honor to help serve the city and the community. And as many of you know, you can't do it without the support behind the scenes of the staff and all of them. They made our job so much easier and able to meet those accomplishments. So again, appreciation to everyone there and to all of you for really allowing, the citizens of this city to be able to volunteer and be interactive, and you've always been inviting and appreciative, and this is proof of it. I appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you very much, and hopefully as soon as we are allowed to have public participation at City Hall, I hope that we can see you in person and thank you with the justified handshake that your service deserves.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Quisenberry. Enjoy your evening.
You too.
Thank you. Okay, our next item on the agenda is our public comments. As of 5:30 this evening, we did not receive any public comments, and to my knowledge, there's no one from the public that has attended our meeting this evening. So I will go on to the next item on our agenda, which is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted?
Excuse me, Mayor Belisi, this is Steve Worthington, Mayor Pro Tem. I move for approval of the consent agenda.
Thank you. I'm glad I'm not the only one having difficulty this evening speaking.
You bet.
Do I have a second?
As Councilmember Keel, I second.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Are there any objections to the current motion to approve the consent agenda? Okay, not hearing any. The approval of the consent agenda passes unanimously. Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is city manager and council comments. Mr. Sugg, do you have a city manager report for us?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I do. 3 quick items. This Wednesday, April 7th, our Planning Commission is going to be holding a public hearing on small cell telecommunication amendments. Secondly, our engineering department finished a speed study on Cirque Drive and found that after the project, which was recently completed, the Cirque Phase 3 sidewalk project, there have been a 12% reduction in the 85th percentile speeds, and that equates to around a 5 mph reduction in speed along that stretch of street that we had studied in the before-after condition. So we've taken 85th percentile speeds from before the project from 40 mph down to 35 mph following the installation of the project. So the speed data was collected near the 9600 block of Cirque Drive between Breckenridge Drive and Grandview Drive. So we're very pleased. Once again, engineering, properly engineered streets do assist law enforcement and traffic enforcement And it's like silent policemen out there. So we appreciate that. And then finally, COVID-19 update. Pierce County has opened a call center for members of the community that do not have access to a computer, but they need help getting vaccinated. So they will put this up on our website. They've got a flyer that they put out, but the number for the public, if you're listening, and you can go to our website and see the information. It's area code 253-798-8900. That's 253-798-8900. That call center is going to be open from Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. for those that would like help getting vaccinated. But if you don't have a computer, call that number 798-8900. Finally, also on the positive side of things, all adults over the age of 16 are able to become vaccinated on or after April 15th. So a major milestone in the vaccination efforts as we move forward. So that's my report, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, with that, I will go through the list here. This is a time for council comments. Councilmember Keel, do you have any comments at this time or report outs?
Councilmember Keel, thank you, Mayor. I have nothing for this evening.
Okay. Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, any report outs or comments at this time?
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, I have nothing to report at this time.
Okay. Councilmember McCluskey, do you have any report outs or comments at this time?
Councilmember McCluskey doesn't have any report outs or comments. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Councilmember Fleming, any comments or report outs at this time?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Fleming has no comments or report outs tonight.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, comments or report outs?
Mayor Bellisi, Mayor Pro Tem Worthington will join the crowd and has no comments or reports out this evening.
Okay. Actually, I have a couple of report outs. I believe Councilmember Councilmember Pro Tem and myself, along with staff, joined in on a virtual meeting with our Councilmember Mello. Just a brief introduction, talking about our needs and how we can cooperate with, work collaboratively with the council, and just listed some of our top priorities. So hopefully he's in tune to some of those asks. We will be having a in-person meeting with Representative Strickland on this coming Friday to review some of our major potential construction projects that we have that we will need some federal assistance on, that being the bridge to Day Island and hopefully the bridge over Chambers Bay. And hopefully Councilmember Mello can also join us during that discussion to see what needs to be done to move those projects forward. Other than that, I will cut it short because I know that there are some major issues going on in the country that I'm sure other people would like to get some updates on after this meeting concludes. So that was just a brief report out. And with that, I'm going to go on to our next item, which is our study session. The first item on our study session is the write-off policy ordinance that you have in your packet. Our Finance Director, Leslie Blaisdell, will be presenting a staff report. So, Ms. Blaisdell.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Leslie Blaisdell, Finance Director. Tonight's study session is an ordinance relating to delinquent accounts. It contains two sections, one which authorizes the city manager or his designee to enter into payment plans with individuals who cannot meet their financial obligations. And the second section establishes a write-off policy, and that policy is if attempts to collect money owing to us fail and at least 120 days have passed since the original due date, the receivable will be sent to a collection agency, and no less than 24 months after the original due date, if it remains uncollected, that we may write off the debt provided the amount of the receivable is less than $1,000. Any debts that would exceed $1,000 that we would consider for write-off would come to the council for separate approval. And we would do that on an annual basis, much the same as we do uncashed checks and that sort of thing as a year-end procedure. Attempts to collect the debts are done by finance staff, and then they are already referred to a collection agency after 120 days. But the issue is that amounts are booked into our system as accounts receivable, so they're reported in our annual comprehensive financial report as an asset, listed basically as monies that we expect to receive. And after 24 months of collection efforts, the likelihood of receiving these monies is greatly reduced. The odds of getting it are pretty slim, and writing them off will true up our city accounting records. But I will say that the collection agency continues to work those accounts even after they've been written off of our books. This is merely an accounting adjustment. And any monies received after the write-off would be posted as a miscellaneous revenue to the general fund. So that concludes my report. If anyone has any questions.
Okay, I see Mayor Pro Tem Worthington has raised his hand.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. A couple of quick questions. One is just what's the oldest receivable we have that would meet this definition? And then the other is... the other one is just what's the approximate total?
2004, when we implemented the accounts receivable system, and because we don't have utilities, we don't do a lot of billings, and so it was never really a number that rose to the top of something we needed to take care of. But after 17 years, they start to add up, and it's a fairly large number reflected in our net position. So we want to get this cleaned up and taken care of.
And then what is that number, more or less, approximately at this point?
Right now, it's at about $230,000. It's 109 different accounts going back 17 years.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions for the moment.
Okay, Council Member Fleming.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Leslie, for the report. I have a couple of questions. One is, who's our collection agency? And number two is, what's our collection rate?
Currently, we utilize Alliance One, and the collection rate is not that great. We're already researching other options. The state just put out their list for their state contract, and so Jennifer Robinson, our accounts receivable person, is contacting all of the three companies on the state's bid list to get details, and we're looking to switch because we haven't had a lot of success with the current one we're using.
What is our current rate?
I don't have a percentage, but most of our accounts are fairly old, so they've exceeded statutes of limitations, so there's not a lot they can do on that. I can look into what we've received lately. I don't have a percentage right now.
Are we obligated to use only what the state list of collection agencies are? Or does the city have the latitude to pick anyone?
We have the latitude, but we would have to go out to a bid and get the different costs related to each one. So it tends to be easier to use the state bid because they've gone through that process already. Currently, the three companies that responded to the state's bid, one is in Bellevue, one is in Spokane, and one is out of state.
So I'll throw my 10-cent preference on the table since you provided that for us. Out-of-state collections, I'm not impressed with, to be honest. I think if we're going to do a collection, again, we're simply hired to be the stewards of the public's money. So it's not our money to do what we want. If we're going to collect the money that's owed the city and owed the citizens of this city, then we should have a collection agency that can work local, get the job done, and get those, whatever those funds are. And I'm not saying we should be out grabbing people who can't afford it. I liked your proposal of, can we put up payment plans? I'm all for that kind of stuff in lieu of, ruining someone's life just to collect the money. But at the end of the day, if there was an obligation there, then there's an obligation to pay in one form or fashion, and we should be doing that.
Okay. Councilmember McCluskey.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, my two previous questions were already answered by Mayor Pro Tem Worthington and Councilmember Fleming in regards to how much of a problem we have, which is quite surprising to hear that. So when we go out with a collection agency, I know different agencies have different terms. So on the aggregate, how much money do we get back in a collection? Do we get all of it back or a portion of it back? Because I know some collection agencies charge fees. And so since some of these are so old and they can go on for quite some time and get pretty stale, how much would we receive on some of the old stale ones versus the new ones?
The current agency we use now adds their fee to the bill, so we get our full amount when and if they collect it. I haven't gotten into the details. I just got the new state contract stuff this week. That's what Jennifer's researching, and that would be an element we would be looking at when deciding which agency to go for. Are they adding the fee on? Are they taking a percent of what is owed to us when they collect it? And that will all go into our analysis when we select the vendor.
Mm-hmm. And also, when you select a vendor, would they have a timestamp onto when they would consider the account unrefundable?
At some point, statute of limitations becomes an issue. Other times, there's just no assets. We get reports that there's just nothing for them to even attach to. They continue trying as long as there's something to go after.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And why did you pick the $1,000 benchmark to bring the debt to City Council?
That just, as we looked at other cities' policies, we felt like $1,000. Most of our debts under $1,000 are in the $90 to $200 range. They're like animal impound fees, false alarm fees, small items like that. But $1,000 seemed to be a good number that other cities were using, and was something that could be done at a staff level rather than bring every item to council.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Leslie. That's all for now.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Keel.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Leslie, thank you for your report. Great report, as all of your reports always have been. The question I have is, it sounded like 17 years, $100,000. I mean, have we had a debt collections process in place before? And so, yes. So,
we have.
Okay, so, but it doesn't sound like, and you said this, doesn't sound like it was very effective because we've been carrying this for a long time, right?
Right, and this is just a write-off policy. We never had a policy to be able to take these off of our books before, and we would need council authorization to do that. And so the main part of this policy is the write-off policy. But we also wanted to include the ability to enter into payment plans. And, but we already have been using a collection agency. At about 120 days, we send it to collections.
Right, so that was my next question is, it seems like we would have written these things off.
Yes.
So, so now we're in the policy. So what happens on our books that when you write stuff off? I mean, in private business, they have, when they write stuff off, they have some tax, benefit to that. Is there a benefit to us at all when we write things off, or to the citizens?
No, we don't get any tax benefit or anything like that. What it does is makes our financial report a bit more accurate, because if we're reporting as part of our assets $200,000 of money we're expecting to receive, when in all reality we're not expecting to receive that full amount, it just trues up our accounting records and makes our financial report more accurate.
So this is a true write-off. It's like, we're just kissing it goodbye. I mean, like,
correct.
It's the money that we should have had, rightfully so, should be ours just to put back into our system for the citizens. But because of whatever, We're just saying,
Correct.
yeah. I get that, but that just, especially when you accumulate all of the stuff, right? You know, you talk about $100,000, you know, over whatever time period, it's still $100,000, and with, you know, all the problems we have with our finances, it's just weird. Okay, thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
Okay. I know Mayor Pro Tem, you had your hand up, but Councilmember Pro Tem Lee had raised his hands and hadn't spoken yet, so I will call on him.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have one quick question, and it's probably a very simple question, is we aren't doing business with these people anymore, right? That are on this list of unpaid bills?
No, most of these are not businesses because it's false alarm fees and animal impound fees. And our largest items are damages to city property caused from uninsured drivers.
Right.
And so those are the biggest ones.
With respect to the alarms, are those people, we're not honoring those alarms anymore? We aren't answering them?
I believe after a certain number, yes, the police put them on a do not respond list.
I mean, but because of the unpaid bills.
Right.
Okay.
I believe that Leslie Wheeler tracks that and until it's paid.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. Let me get my hand down before my arm wears out. Any case, Leslie, thank you for the information, and as has been said, a good report as always. So ultimately, we've been chasing after some of these people for 16, 17 years or something along that line. They haven't paid, they aren't going to pay, and we're carrying a $200,000 asset that doesn't really exist. And we just need to get that off the books and get realistic about the assets that we have. So certainly this takes us in that direction, and we need to have a vehicle by which we can get our books true, as you put it. And this makes sense. To me, it seems like $1,000 is while it's arguably a little arbitrary, it is a number, and it is, if it's larger than that amount, then the council gets to decide if they wish to pursue it further or write the item off. And given 16 years of collections, or lack thereof, it's not surprising, I guess, that can reach $200,000 and change at this point. So while it's a little hard to swallow that pill that has us take that off the books, the fact is it's not a real asset. It's not something that we could take to the bank, nor is anyone going to pay us for it, nor can we borrow money against it because they know better. So in any case, from my side, we might as well proceed when the time's right for us, from my perspective, though I do hate to walk away from the paper value. The fact is it doesn't have value to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before we move on to our next item? Okay, not seeing any. I think this will be ready. Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be very quick because I know we're punching up against a time
Some
situation.
of you are.
But, at first I was really kind of pressing in a different direction about these write-offs, and I was a little remorse about wanting to do that. But when you calculate out the way Councilmember Worthington put it, that's a little over $1,000 a month that we would be asked to be writing off if you just divvy it up and do the simple math on it. So certainly something, not that I want to write anything off, but something as we go through this conversation, just keep in mind.
Yep.
So there you go.
Yep, thank you. Okay, well, thank you, Ms. Blaisdell, for your presentation, and this will be on our Councilmember Pro Tem Worthington and myself will look to schedule this for adoption at a later council meeting. Okay, our next item is the Four Corners legislative proposal. It's a proposal that has been forwarded from Councilmember Keel and I seconded on. And so with that, I believe David Swindell, our planning director, is also on to help move this discussion forward. So, Mr. Swindell.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. The proposal before you this evening is a Four Corners Memorandum of Understanding. The Four Corners refers to the intersection of 19th Street West and Mildred Avenue West. The reason for the proposal is to prepare for Sound Transit's light rail station at Pierce Transit's Tacoma Community College Transit Center, which will connect the district to the region with high-capacity transit. What happens today and in the future will determine the success of the Four Corners District for all the stakeholders. On each corner of that intersection, one or more jurisdictions, agencies, and stakeholders have independent interests and goals. On the northeast corner in the city of Tacoma, we have Pierce Transit, as I indicated, their Tacoma Community College Transit Center, and Tacoma Community College. On the northwest corner, also in the city of Tacoma, is James Center and the future location of Tacoma Housing Authority's James Centers North, an equitable mixed-use and mixed-income apartment complex. On the southwest corner, it's the city of University Place and a part of our own regional growth center with multiple redevelopment opportunities. And finally, on the southeast corner in the city of Fircrest, they have a center of local important designation and a business district with additional redevelopment opportunities. Future development proposed in the area also includes, as I said, Sound Transit's light rail station and a large Metropark sports complex at 19th and Tyler. While each jurisdiction, agency, and stakeholder have independent goals and interests, there should be a common goal to create a transit-oriented development centered around the Four Corners. The transit-oriented development is a type of urban development that minimizes the amount of residential, or maximizes, the amount of residential, business, and leisure space within walking distance of public transportation. It promotes a symbiotic relationship between dense, compact urban form and public transportation use. In doing so, the transit-oriented development aims to create a public transportation ridership or increase it by reducing the use of private cars and promoting sustainable urban growth. And that's a quote from the transit-oriented development. The fiscal impact transit-oriented development is a responsible fiscal choice for local government and can save local government money, as detailed financial impacts of transportation development projects, oriented development projects have shown. The outcome would be a memorandum of understanding or a interlocal agreement between the stakeholders to cooperate and promote transit-oriented development within their jurisdictions and the projects within the district. And the resources we would require is at least one representative from each stakeholder group to jointly develop the memorandum of understanding or interlocal agreement. That is the legislative proposal as presented.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Swindell. Before we go to questions and answers, Councilmember Keel, you, as a proponent of this, would you like to talk about it?
Great, thank you, Mayor. I certainly would. And David, thank you for your report and for your work on putting this document together and what I hope to be your future work in doing this MOU. The reason why I put this forward is you can see all of the different agencies that are involved in this corner, and you know we're set. All of us are set to spend millions of dollars and many years developing those properties at that intersection. And those of you that were on council at the time may recall 2 years ago now, I think somewhere along in there, we brought a group of people together, all of the entities together, down, you know, on our property in our city hall on the first floor to discuss this. I mean, it was quite the meeting, quite the day. You know, we've had all the mayors from all three cities, council members, their staffs. We had a representative from the president of the college, the executive director from Tacoma Housing, and somebody from the governor's office. It was just a big group of people, and a lot of council members were there to discuss this. What the goal here is to really have a well thought out plan for how we're going to develop that corner, how all of the entities can develop it. And the big thing is to bring Sound Transit into the conversation because of what we all know that they do when they come into a community. They tear stuff up, to put their light rail in, and my hope is that we can have a conversation up front and some agreements about what's going to go where and the design and all those things, so that when development starts, albeit years out the way, we have had that conversation up front, and we can put together an area, a community that really looked like there was some forethought into making all those things happen. So that's the goal, and my hope is that you all support this legislation so we can move it forward.
Well said, Councilmember Keel. I've got to say, having been involved in that conversation 2 years ago with the jurisdictions, it was amazing that there was some surprising news that came out from various jurisdictions about plans that they had that the rest of the participants were not aware of. One being that Sound Transit was talking about having a maintenance station in the area that would require anywhere from 6 to 10 acres. Well, when we think of those four corners, that's high productive retail generating spaces for three of those jurisdictions, Tacoma, University Place, and Fircrest. And it came as rather a surprise that these discussions were going on unbeknownst to those jurisdictions that would be most impacted by that. I think having an interlocal agreement or a memorandum of understanding forces the issue and forces all jurisdictions and governmental entities to think ahead rather than behind. And I think we would do a great service to our private developers that are going to be spending the millions of dollars of investment in those properties to have an idea of what exactly is being planned and how it is being planned, so that they don't invest their funds, government doesn't invest funds in sidewalks and infrastructure only to have it come be ripped out within 5, 10, maybe 15 years. If we can continue that conversation and understand what the plans and needs are for all the governmental entities, for the private developers, et cetera, we might be able to circumvent some potential disasters down the road. So that's one reason I supported this initiative. I'm not always a fan of another layer of government, but I think in this case, having an agreement in place forces people to talk and be aware of what decisions are being made and how those decisions have a potential to impact people. Councilmember McCluskey.
Hey, thank you, Mayor. I'm also not a proponent of another layer of government, but this is a memo of understanding. I don't view it as another layer of government, just so that everyone puts their cards on the table. Right now, some of them are holding their cards pretty tightly to their chest, which makes me kind of nervous. I do like the wording of the symbiotic relationship, as long as it's not divergent, so that we can protect our interests and our assets and not really dive deeply into changes of our comprehensive plan and our form-based code that we worked so hard to get, and that we also can leverage and synergize our funding with the other jurisdictions through this memo of understanding. I think that will be totally value added, and we can keep University Place's thumbprint on at least our neck of the woods in that four corner area, and not make it a transit barn at the end of the day, but to help augment wherever they're going to place that, as well as that sports complex down the road, which certainly will synergize the four corner activities. So, which is exciting. So I would like this member of understanding to have the understanding to the other partners, especially the big players of Sound Transit in the city of Tacoma, that we come to the table equally with our interests, and they're not to use their bully stick to browbeat us into changing some of the concepts to augment some of their plans that would be at the detriment of what we're trying to do in our vision for the Narrows, because that's a prime piece of property, and it certainly can bring a lot of value to the city of UP if we do it right. So I'm interested in seeing the outcomes of the memo of understanding when it comes before the city council, and so that we can have a discussion and dialogue and protect our city's interests and assets. Thank you.
Oh, certainly. Thank you, Councilmember Keel.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And Councilmember McCluskey, that's exactly why we want to do this now. It's my as you know, my role in Sound Transit is the chair of Sound Transit. I have the ability to bring them to the table and to talk about this issue and to have some pretty significant impact in discussions around where that barn is going to be and where it should sit, as well as working with the other players. The city of Tacoma, the mayor of Tacoma is on that board with me, as well as the county executive. I think he will have some conversation and input into the whole conversation as well. So I think the time is right for us to do this now. While I'm in the position that I'm in, because they do have to pay attention. And I will certainly be looking out for Sound Transit's best interest, but I'll be looking out for University Place's best interest too as well.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I will see. We will discuss this as to next steps, but it appears that there is a consensus that we at least move in the direction that the legislative proposal was intended to move towards. So, all right, thank you. We will move on to our next item, which is the Comcast franchise agreement, and we have a staff report from our attorney, Mr. Matt Kaiser.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. Matt Kaiser, City Attorney. I'm here talking to you tonight about a Comcast franchise. As we get into this, I want to just kind of set a little bit of a table here in terms of identifying outcomes at the beginning. Think of this more as a touch base in terms of where we are at on what's been a multi-year process, and if there's any further council direction that is needed, this is primarily that opportunity to do so. I think, as council is aware, the City of University Place has had a franchise with Comcast for cable television services. Our most recent franchise was enacted back in 2003. It was for a 10-year agreement. It has expired. We have not seen a new agreement since it expired in 2013. So we've been working in the last 7-8 years without a franchise with Comcast. Fortunately, depending on one's perspective, we have not been alone in this situation. There are a number of other jurisdictions locally that either have had franchises with Comcast that either have expired or are about to expire. And everyone's been kind of doing their thing, trying to figure out how do we negotiate these franchises. About a year and a half ago, we received a phone call from the Rainier Communications Commission. They informed us that the city of DuPont was beginning to finalize a franchise. And they said, hey, we understand University Place is in a similar boat. do you guys want in? Do you guys want to participate on those negotiations? And we said, of course we do. As we circled around with other RCC members, we realized that there was a similar interest. And so a number of RCC members, probably about a half dozen plus of us, got together and said, look, is there a common framework of a telecommunications franchise that we can agree to with Comcast? With the recognition, and we sat down with Comcast on this too, with the recognition being that of the local jurisdictions, that this would form the template or the basis for any future negotiations with Comcast. And the idea was, if we can get an agreement that 95% plus of it is agreeable for the local jurisdictions, then each jurisdiction could pursue locally independent interests unique to their situation. So for example, in the instance of the City of University Place, we have a strong interest in UPTV. With the county, they have a strong interest in rural broadband. But the idea was get everybody up to a baseline template that everyone was on board with. I'm pleased to report that we have concluded those stages of the negotiations, and what you have in front of you as part of your packet tonight represents that product. This product was approved by the RCC board at a recent meeting earlier this year, and we're finalizing the point where we've identified UP specific stuff. And as I indicated in my initial comments, this is sort of the touch base with council. If there's anything else that at the council level you see need one in that franchise, now is a good time. This is the time for that conversation, because following this study session with anything that council has, our intent is to go back to Comcast with those city-specific asks and hopefully come back with a final franchise for council discussion and approval, whether it's weeks or months down the road. These franchises don't come together very quickly, as I've outlined with my comments, but they are there. So let me give you kind of a quick lay of the land here. Most of the changes in the franchise are under the hood changes. These are changes that in the intervening 17, 18 years, there have been changes at the federal and state levels. These accommodate those changes, ranging from FCC orders to requirements under the Public Records Act. They also reflect practical changes related to things like insurance and timelines. From the customer perspective and the consumer perspective, they're not going to see that. Where our residents are likely to see changes, and kind of the guts of this, where there are going to be changes, relate to what we call PEG and PEG access. PEG stands for Public, Education, and Government. And that's your traditional public access channels. It also includes things like UPTV and PCTV. And the changes that we're looking at primarily fall into a couple different camps. The first is a change in how PEG fees are calculated. Currently, if you are a Comcast subscriber, there's a flat PEG fee of 50 cents in University Place. The RCC is evaluating new modeling, and they've identified and have recommended that folks move to a percentage-based model. That's in large part because customers are down with revenues being up, and those costs and expenditures are only for capital-related expenditures to put the content across. Things like the cameras in council chambers, the control board back behind council chambers, those sort of things. Also on the PEG front, we're streaming tonight broadband, but if we were also in council chambers streaming across PCTV or UPTV, we would be an SD. There's room to accommodate and finally get with the times to include the capacity for HD, high definition, to get those channels out. The draft franchise provides for 2 HD channels with room to accommodate a third, and on certain other conditions. But these percentage models, and I think it's been alluded to in other council meetings, reflect some broader changes that are afoot in terms of how does the RCC structure. Those aren't quite yet ready for prime time, no pun intended. But we do foresee some changes in the RCC delivery model coming down the pipeline. Most of the other changes, and so what we've identified, at least at the staff level, in order to keep pace with UPTV, and UP will probably be unique amongst the member jurisdictions, is advocating for a higher PEG fee so we can provide the UP specific services associated with providing our PEG channel. We're the only municipality that's a member of the RCC with our own PEG channel. Other things that are sort of below the hood relate to access to right-of-ways and construction. We've identified a couple internal issues associated with that we intend to go back to Comcast on. One thing that I do want to highlight before I wrap up my remarks, or two things, I suppose, is in our original franchise back from 2003, we do have room in there for what are called return lines. Think of return lines as dedicated point-to-point communication spots. We have return lines that dead end in front of Windmill Village and one that feeds the school district. When we started looking at this, we realized we never used the Windmill Village line. And when we contacted the school district, we got a response that suggests that they don't seem to think that they have a return line. The draft franchise calls for no return lines. So if our assumption is wrong, we're going to make a final check with the school district before we finalize this. But if that return is wrong, obviously we'll make a correction. But we're pretty confident, based on what we understand right now, that there's no downside to giving up those return lines. And the final thing I want to talk about, just briefly while I'm on the financial note, is that there's no change to the franchise fee that's contained within the agreement. And I think as council is aware, there's a separate utility tax associated with telecom that's addressed separately. So we're not seeing, with the exception of the PEG calculations, and otherwise appreciable financial change in the city's position. But most of this is updating due to changes in legislation, updating with the times, and updating with the technology. So with that, I'm already seeing the hands pop up. I'm happy to turn back to the council for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Kaiser. Councilmember Fleming, you had your hand raised.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Matt, I have a few questions for you.
Sure.
Number one, I think it's important to keep in mind the reason why we haven't had this franchise in place was through no fault of the city, but really Comcast has been the one that dragged their feet on this over time. So I am glad to see that we're finally bringing some conclusion to it. My first question is how long is we're getting a lot of how long is this franchise good for?
It's stated by its terms for a 10-year franchise. However, it also provides that it continues in effect month to month until there's a new franchise in place.
Mm-hmm. So does that benefit the city or Comcast?
I believe it does benefit the city at the end of the day. It avoids the situation that we're in now, which is there a franchise? Is there not a franchise? Mm-hmm. You know, are we at risk of losing that particular access to service? From a commercial perspective, I don't see that from Comcast, but I do think at the end of the day, it is still a benefit to the city.
Okay. You know, my second question is, in this franchise, do we limit the number of cuts that they can make and require them to lay the conduit so we can minimize the number of cuts in the road?
This still minimizes the cuts. I think, as you are aware, we do have a cut moratorium, you know, for newly paved roads. I stand to be corrected on this, whether I believe it's a 3-year cut. So if we've resurfaced a road, there are no cuts, but we do have the ability to direct where cuts and preserve our right of way.
Okay. I mean, that's a biggie for the city. At one time we had kind of a free for all for cuts, and the city was repairing roads like there was no tomorrow, you know, for that. You know, the next question is, you know, you addressed the PEG and the HD. You know, for most people in telecommunications will recognize that's really legacy kind of communications as we're getting into the 21st century. Over the top programming and streaming is really becoming the standard, if you will, for programming. My question is, you know, Comcast obviously is figuring out that they have to flex a little bit to stay competitive in the marketplace they're in right now. The franchise, so far as you've addressed it, has only spoken to the legacy portion of communications. Where is that language for the future? So as things morph, that we stay current and not find ourselves behind the curve.
Yeah, and let me kind of address that, and I want to address it in two parts because you're right that PEG seems to be, something that's depreciated. While we refer to PEG in the legal sense, PEG, one of the concepts throughout this agreement is kind of dropping the P from the old public access component and referring to it simply as EGG. You can pick up, whether it's Seattle broadcast or if you want to go fiction with Wayne's World on Channel 10 in Aurora, Illinois. And access from there. But with the day of YouTube and TikTok, folks aren't using that as much as they are so on the government side. So there's a recognition, a practical recognition, both by the governments who negotiated this and Comcast, that that's really where the thrust of it is. But to your point, in terms of where the technology is updated, Title 10 of Title 9 of the franchise, it is where the updating portion of that is, in terms of where things are kept with current technology. One of the challenges that Comcast shared with us is actually finding where on the channel is it that they can find room to program the HD channels for PEG. And that was a very key concern, I think, for all of us who were negotiating that on behalf of the local governments, which is we need to stay constant with the times, and we need to make sure that this is future-proofed. So whether it's 4K, HK, or something like that down the road, do we have that? And what we try to do is to make sure that it was still there. But to the point, to your original question, which is it's a 10-year franchise. I don't know probably any more than any of us know in 10 years what's going to be the then prevailing norm. I don't want to lock in today, and say, well, HD is going to be the baseline when maybe we're seeing this in holographic 3D lens. I'm being a little facetious, but I'm trying to.
No, you're spot on.
Yeah, but I want to make the point that we want that ability to come back and look at that when that franchise is up there. And it kind of goes back to the medical piece of do no harm. And so I think we're there in terms of making sure that the current and intermediate needs are addressed while still providing that flexibility for the future.
Just in my final comment is to your point, the technology as we understand it today in communications and broadcasting will most likely be passe within the next 24 months. So, if it holds true to what the past, as they say, the past is prologue to the future. If this holds true, then yeah, the things you negotiate today will really be behind us. So as long as we've got a piece in that franchise that keeps us rolling with the current times as those times evolve, then I think we'll be okay.
Yeah.
So those are my final comments. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, you have your hand raised.
I do. Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. And I appreciate Councilmember Fleming's comments earlier with regards to keeping this adaptable for changing technologies. It's a key piece for us, and we have some provisions in the document to help us there. That's a very good point. I had a couple of things, one of which is I serve on the Rainier Communications Commission, and so have watched this unfold, worked with it to a certain degree, and appreciate Matt's involvement in this. Wanted to also mention the RCC did, as a member there, we also received then the oversight, kind of the person in the first chair on the negotiations was a experienced franchise attorney who is a specialist in this around the country, and that gave one, it didn't draw extensively on Matt's time, and two, it allowed us to work where we needed to, specific to our needs. So appreciated that. At least, I don't know, Matt, is that a fair characterization? Wasn't.
I will tell you, if it wasn't for COVID, I don't know how I would have gotten it done. So.
All right. Oh, good.
But I appreciate the kind words nonetheless.
Yeah. So I wanted to touch on a couple of other things, though. And so I've seen that come together on the master franchise. There are a few things that are UP-centric that come to mind. One is on our undergrounding, or on the provisions in the draft document, we talk about undergrounding, and I think city staff's had a chance to weigh in on that, too. And it basically says when everybody undergrounds, then cable's going underground as well, and that all makes sense in theory, and I have no real problem with it. But I do want to make a distinction that there's a difference in certain types of wired overhead lines. We have distribution lines, which are the ones that we see typically underground. Then we have large transmission lines, such as along Bridgeport for certain areas and elsewhere in our community. And those large transmission lines aren't going to go underground. We don't have the dollars to make that happen. It's a very, very expensive and seldom done situation to bring transmission underground. And so I just want to make sure that it's clear in the franchise and clear in everyone's expectations that we're not going to wait for the undergrounding of transmission lines to require cable to come underground. So there's a distinction to be made. As I looked through the document, I didn't really see that distinction, but it's typically one that folks make. And let's see. There's a small provision in there about taking a look or being able to review complaints, and I think we should exercise that opportunity and just ask for UP specific complaints, whatever's available. I suspect there's very little there, but I don't know, and we won't know unless we ask. So it's just already in the agreement, and periodically we should do that, and there's a chance in the negotiations for us to do that. That's great that we have HD provisions coming in. I'm sure that was hard fought because it took capacity, as Matt was explaining. So that works out well. So in general, the Federal Communications Agency has been moving more and more to deregulate. And one example of that has been that the FCC now allows cable providers to charge municipalities like us for cable service. Previously, because it was the public's money that was being spent and it was their right-of-way that was used for the wires for the cable company to operate, we didn't have to pay for your straightforward cable. We're not talking HBO here, folks, nor the sports channel, but just basic, straightforward cable, which was delivered to various city facilities around this nation as a result. FCC changed that recently, and so we may start seeing a bill on that. And I use that just to illustrate how they shifted. Now, maybe it'll shift back. There's a change of party in the White House. Perhaps that leads to a change there. But if it doesn't, and even if it does, because these things take time, and I'm guessing, in my view, the longer term, the better for the franchise agreement. Now, we have a 10-year term, and often these documents may run more like 20. And so, from my perspective, to the extent that we can get this to run longer than 10, great. That's a negotiated issue, though. The master document's set at 10, and all. So I'm not sure if you can hear the household noise behind me, but my dogs are having a lot of fun, and all. So yeah. So who knows the joys of working at home? It is a joy generally, though. Let's see. Spoke about term and the FCC payment issue. I think I've covered most of the things that come to my mind as I was looking at the documents. So thanks for the opportunity to comment on those.
Thank you very much. Councilmember McCluskey, you had some comments or questions.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I had a question because of the lending towards the RCC with the difference between 3.75 and the 0.6%. Says that, are we going to go to the 0.6% and gaining revenue to the city of $15,000? Is that how I'm reading this?
Yeah. The difference between the 0.6% and 0.375% on PEG ratepayers would be retained by the City of University Place to cover our capital PEG expenditures. And that comes out on the high side to about $15K annually. And those are exclusively for our specific capital costs that the RCC does not otherwise cover to put UPTV and our programming out across the air. And I've got Linda Sees, our communications manager, if she wants to chime in here. But we're talking things like handheld video cameras. I know we got a controller board of, back in there that's not RCC supplied, and those other specific capital expenses. Linda, I don't know if you wanted to jump in and identify just kind of a list of those sort of things.
I can add that closed captioning will be coming in. One of the services that RCC will be handling it for us is that. However, there are some local pieces that we would need to put in place. If you look around council chambers now, the dollars that we had accumulated before from these is what paid for all of the council chambers things that have gone in and the studio space. We still need to flesh out the studio space, so that's where those capital dollars would be spent. There are other things, still cameras, batteries, camera cards, tripods, the things that we normally keep fairly up to date that we use all the time. Those are used for, that's what those monies are used for.
Okay, $15,000 will not go very far for, the camera and software expenses. I know that. So is this 50 cents per subscriber per month, I presume? Will go
it is
to
currently 50 cents per subscriber per
right.
month.
I was going to ask how much would it go up to?
I ran my very loose back of the envelope numbers before the meeting. If I took gross revenues, gross subscribers and ran it, I came out to, I think, 0.67 with some odd percentage at the end in terms of each bill, not percent, but 68 cents and change is what I came out to when I ran my numbers. And remember that 50 cents has been unchanged since at least 2003.
Got it.
So we're not talking an 18% increase, we're talking 18 cents.
Right. I just wanted to get a grasp of some hard numbers to relate to the 50 cents per subscriber. So the other thing is, since it says that the customer base is shrinking, and so I would I like the statements of the previous council members and Mayor Pro Tem as to we are more forward thinking and looking how we can evolve into the future, so that we can use our assets smarter, and we can also reach out our fingerlings into the greater population of UP citizens, so that they can stay informed as to what city government is doing in some of the decisions and outcomes. And so, since the customer base is shrinking, it's kind of the interesting note that maybe we need to look at some other options. I know we've done this many times in the past. We always kind of circle back with all this evolution, but to understand that we are not only, because this is a finite population and it's shrinking, that we look at it and grow the population so that the communication opportunities is still growing. I'd like to see the growth and also having other opportunities for outreach for communication tools through our video and other options that I know you've been exploring and doing. So I commend you on those things. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Keel, you're up next.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Very much enjoying the conversation. And the one thing that I would add at this point is to the respect of looking at the future. These companies like Comcast and what, even though new things are coming on board like TikTok and all those kinds of things, these companies like Comcast are also doing new things, and they're getting into new businesses, and so it may behoove us to think of charging them for the new ways they're doing things, as opposed to letting them just continue to pigeonhole us in this PGE realm, even though the P is dropping off. Then there's, I heard EG. Well, they're probably doing more than that. around that. And so if we're looking toward the future, I think getting out ahead and staying ahead of them where they're going with their offerings and how it does impact, cities and our citizens and how they are charging our city and our citizens, it may be a good thing for us to look at that too as well and then continue to charge them as well. So anyway, that's my thought.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, most of the council members already addressed the comments or questions that I had, so I appreciate saving some airtime for me on that. What is our next step, Mr. Kaiser?
Our next step is based on council comments tonight. I heard general consensus continue to move forward with negotiations. I will take one more look through the franchise in light of some of the concerns, particularly on the undergrounding, making sure that the future proofing is as strong as we need it to be there. We will reach out to Comcast. We've identified, like I shared with you, a couple specific items. There's a couple on the right-of-way cut side in capital project side. The next thing that hopefully you will be seeing is, whether it's a few weeks or a few months from now, is a final franchise, and we'll be having this discussion again with here is the franchise and then ultimately a council vote.
All right. Look forward to hearing more as we move forward to final contract review and acceptance. So, all right. Any other comments or questions at this time? Okay, not seeing any, we will adjourn this meeting, and may the Zags win tonight.